What if the most profound mysteries of our world aren't hidden in forgotten crypts, but lie, vast and unseen, beneath the churning surface of our own oceans? What if beneath the waves, an ancient intelligence, slumbering for millennia, stirred not by chance, but awakened by a dark pact forged in the hubris of man? And what if for generations, a single family has paid the terrifying price for that ancient transgression, their very bloodline tethered to an inescapable, watery fate? This is not a tale of fiction, nor a forgotten legend from distant lands. This is a true, chilling account from the heart of America, a story whispered through the salt-laced air of the Outer Banks, where the Atlantic devours ships and secrets without remorse. Here, amidst the relentless murmur of the tides, stands a testament to enduring dread. A crumbling coastal manor, its weathered timbers groaning like a spectral ship caught in an eternal storm. For centuries, this isolated structure, perched precariously on a windswept promontory, has watched over a stretch of ocean notorious for its inexplicable disappearances and spectral lights. It is a silent witness to generations of maritime misfortune, a place where the past isn't merely remembered, but actively breathes, and the very air feels heavy with unspoken histories. Within its decaying walls, heirlooms from ill-fated expeditions gathered dust, each artifact a chilling relic of a pursuit that ended in ruin. The nearby docks, skeletal remains reaching out into the churning gray, are monuments to an ocean that takes everything and gives nothing back. This is the ancestral home of the Miller family, a lineage cursed not by a hex, but by a chilling inheritance woven into their very DNA. For centuries, their name has been synonymous with an unspoken dread, their lives inextricably bound to the Bermuda Triangle's most forbidden secrets. The legend, for it began as a legend before it became a horrifying truth, speaks of an audacious folly committed by an 18th century privateer, an ancestor of the Millers. Driven by an insatiable hunger for glory and untold riches, he dared to plunder relics from a submerged civilization, an ancient power lying dormant within the very heart of the Triangle's abyssal depths. It was a transgression against something vast, something primordial, and the ocean, it seems, never forgets. That dark pact, forged in the recklessness of a bygone era, has resurfaced, defying all scientific explanation, demanding its due with a terrifying, rhythmic precision. For the Millers, their world is a fragile present, a constant struggle against an inescapable legacy. The patriarch, Elias Miller, grapples with a creeping dementia, his mind a labyrinth of ancient nautical charts and cryptic warnings. His whispers are not the ramblings of old age, but the direct consequence of a cursed lineage, a mind consumed by the ocean's dark influence. His children, particularly Dr. Lyra Miller, a brilliant but haunted marine archaeologist, are tethered to this inheritance, plagued by vivid, terrifying dreams. Dreams of cyclopean ruins, colossal and impossible, stirring beneath the waves. Dreams of monstrous guardians, shadowy leviathans that patrol the abyssal thresholds. It is an intimate terror that defies modern understanding, a nightmare that leaks into their waking lives, a testament to the fact that some debts, though centuries old, still demand payment. The question that echoes through their lives, and now through ours, is chillingly simple. Can a family truly outrun a legacy steeped in the ocean's darkest secrets? Or are some destinies forever bound to the abyssal guardians of the forbidden underworld? The search for truth never ends. And ours is just beginning. Join us as we dive into the oceanic depths. The call from Elias Miller reached us, an unsettling echo across the vast, indifferent Atlantic. It found Professor Alastair Finch, a man whose life's work dissected oceanic anomalies, not embraced them. Finch, lead investigator for the Unspoken Sea, was a titan in marine archaeology, a mind forged at Harvard and MIT. His reputation was built on debunking maritime legends with cold, hard data, sifting through centuries of folklore to unearth the undeniable truths of the sea. His office, filled with declassified naval charts and obscure historical records, was a testament to his empirical devotion. He saw the ocean not as a realm of mythical beasts, but as a complex system governed by physics and verifiable phenomena. The Bermuda Triangle, to him, was a statistical anomaly, a confluence of weather, human error, and unfortunate coincidence, nothing more. When Elias spoke of generational curses, of ancient paths and primeval entities, Finch listened with the practiced patience of a scholar encountering fringe theories. His skepticism was palpable, a shield woven from years of empirical discipline. He believed in observation, the immutable laws of nature, and the irrefutable logic of scientific method. His first step was always the data: sonar readings, flight paths, currents, weather reports. He sought patterns, deviations, the tangible footprints of reality. He had delved into the forgotten logs of Civil War blockade runners, the mysterious disappearances of fishing fleets off the Grand Banks. Even the chilling whispers surrounding the USS Cyclops, all cases yielding to logical, if sometimes tragic, explanations. But the Miller family's account, meticulously documented over generations, presented a unique challenge. It wasn't just a tale. It was a chronicle woven into the very fabric of American maritime history. A recurring shadow across the Outer Banks, a coastline he knew intimately, where colonial shipwrecks whispered their own stories. The detailed accounts of impossible structures and guttural wars from Dr. Lyra Miller's final transmission, relayed by a distraught Elias, pricked at his carefully constructed rationality. This wasn't mere folklore. It was a live, unverified incident demanding his expertise. Finch arrived at the crumbling Miller Manor, the salt-laced air, heavy with untold secrets, not with belief, but with an insatiable, methodical curiosity. He carried no preconceived notions of monsters, only the cold, precise tools of scientific inquiry. His mission was not to validate a curse, but to find a rational explanation for the inexplicable, to anchor the Miller family's nightmare to the bedrock of scientific truth. Could even his vast knowledge of the ocean's unforgiving nature account for a legacy so profoundly steeped in dread? Or was he about to confront a reality that defied every principle he held sacred? This investigation would test the very limits of his empirical world. Our journey into the forbidden underworld began not with a dive into the crushing depths, but with a descent into a crumbling legacy, an inheritance of dread passed down through generations. We arrived at the Miller family manor, perched precariously on the windswept Outer Banks of North Carolina, a structure that felt less like a home and more like a skeletal monument to the ocean's relentless indifference. Its weathered timbers groaned with every gust, a spectral ship anchored to a stretch of coastline infamous for vessels that vanished without a trace, and lights that danced in the pre-dawn mist only to blink out of existence. The air within its decaying walls hung heavy, thick with the unspoken histories of ill-fated expeditions, a place where the past wasn't merely remembered, but actively breathed, a cold, salt-laced breath. The skeletal remains of docks nearby jutted into the churning Atlantic, silent witnesses to an ocean that gives nothing back. Within this desolate fortress, we met Elias Miller, the patriarch, his presence a testament to generations of suffering. His eyes, though clouded by the creeping tendrils of dementia, still held a piercing, desperate clarity when he spoke of the sea. Ancient nautical charts, their parchment brittle with age, lay spread across a dust-laden table, cryptic warnings scrawled in faded ink, the tangible remnants of a mind consumed by a terrifying truth. He was a man caught between the fragile present and an overwhelming past, a living embodiment of the curse that had pursued his lineage for centuries. His voice, at times a whisper, at others a raw plea, painted a picture of an 18th century privateer ancestor whose audacious folly had dared to plunder relics from a submerged civilization, an act that had forged a dark pact now resurfacing, demanding its due. But amidst his fragmented memories, one chilling certainty emerged, sharp and agonizing. The last communication from his daughter, Dr. Lyra Miller. She, a brilliant marine archaeologist, had ventured into a newly charted deep-sea anomaly off the Carolina coast, driven by the very visions that plagued her family's dreams, cyclopean ruins and monstrous guardians stirring beneath the waves. Her final transmission, a faint, fractured echo from the abyss, was a symphony of terror. Panicked screams, disembodied and distorted, followed by fragmented references to an impossible structure, something vast and alien that defied all known geology. Then, a sound, unlike anything earthly, a guttural roar that seemed to tear through the very fabric of the ocean before all contact ceased. Her research vessel, along with her entire crew, had simply vanished, swallowed by the depths, leaving behind only the chilling resonance of that final, primal sound. This abrupt, inexplicable disappearance had forced Elias, broken but resolute, to confront the unspeakable family truth he had long carried. He reached out to us, the Unspoken Sea, as a desperate plea for help, offering his family's terrifying account as an unprecedented real-time investigation into their living nightmare. Lyra had not merely stumbled upon a lost ruin. She had, Elias believed, touched a living, territorial intelligence, demanding its generational due. The Miller family's struggle, he insisted, was a desperate, intimate fight for survival against an ancient, territorial intelligence that viewed their very existence as an encroachment. Their conflict was a frantic race against the clock to unravel the true nature of their ancestors' pact and the abyssal guardians it awakened, not to defeat them, but to somehow sever the bloodline's catastrophic connection to these submerged horrors. Their salvation hinged on either appeasing an incomprehensible power or finding a way to extinguish the curse that had consumed their kin for generations before the last Miller succumbed to the depths. We stood on the precipice of a mystery that transcended scientific inquiry, a dark inheritance that now threatened to consume us all. Are you ready to dive deeper into this chilling legacy, where history is not just revisited, but actively seeks to reclaim its past? The oceanic adventure is just beginning. The very stones of the Miller Manor, an edifice of salt-blasted resilience, seem to breathe a forgotten chill, an omnipresent dread that sinks into the bone. For generations, this isolated sentinel, overlooking the tumultuous Atlantic, has stood as a silent witness to phenomena defying all logic. Dismissed by outsiders as mere quirks of the maritime world, but within its decaying walls, The truth was far more insidious. It began subtly, centuries ago, with whispers in the gale, shadows that danced where no light cast them, and the unsettling sensation of being watched from the lightless depths. Early Miller logs, yellowed and brittle, speak of localized fogs that would roll in from the sea with unnatural speed, dense and disorienting, even on clear, windless days. Mariners would find their bearings lost just miles from shore, compasses spinning wildly, their ships trapped in an ephemeral, suffocating shroud. Then came the sounds, a low, resonant thrumming from beneath the waves, too deep for any known creature, too rhythmic for natural currents. Like the colossal heartbeat of a submerged world, or the turning of unimaginable gears. These were not singular events, but a recurring, escalating symphony of the strange. The effects intensified through the generations. Miller vessels would return to the skeletal docks with their electronic systems inexplicably fried, or worse, with entire sections of their hulls scored by something impossibly vast and sharp, leaving behind no known signature. Electrical surges and outages plagued the manor itself. Not just modern electronics, but antique clocks would halt in unison, and the ancient grandfather clock in the foyer, a family heirloom for centuries, would chime 13 times in the dead of night, its mechanism untouched. Elias Miller, his mind now a fractured mosaic of memory and encroaching terror, often mutters about these very occurrences. He traces intricate patterns on fogged window panes, repeating phrases like the pull, the calling, his words echoing the very tremors felt beneath their feet, tremors that shake the foundations of their cursed home. He speaks of lights beneath the waves, not bioluminescent life, but structured, shifting glows, seen by generations of Millers who stood vigil on this very coastline. Lights that seem to pulse with an ancient intelligence. These aren't isolated incidents, not merely the caprice of a wild ocean. They are a persistent, chilling symphony of the strange, orchestrating a prelude to the unspeakable. A slow, deliberate tightening of an unseen noose around the Miller lineage. Are these the first tremors of an awakening from the deep? Or merely the relentless grind of a forgotten curse, chipping away at the very fabric of their reality? Dive with us into this unexplored abyssal world, the chilling specter haunting the Miller family, an entity demanding its grim toll, is not some amorphous curse born of superstition. Its tendrils stretch back centuries, rooted in an audacious act of hubris committed by one of their own. Captain Nathaniel Miller, an 18th century privateer, whose name, once whispered with a mixture of awe and fear along the North Carolina coast, now carries the weight of a generational sin. Nathaniel was a man forged in the crucible of the nascent American Republic, driven by the fierce independence and insatiable ambition that characterized his era. But his quest for wealth, sanctioned by the Crown for privateering, led him not merely to enemy ships, but to an adversary far more ancient and formidable than any human fleet. It was during a fierce autumnal gale, so local legends claim, that Captain Miller's brig, the Sea Serpent, was driven far off course, thrust into a sector of the Atlantic, whispered about only in hushed tones by seasoned mariners, a place where the currents seemed to defy nature, and the very stars offered no reliable guidance. Amidst the chaos of the storm, as the skies bled twilight and the waves clawed at his hull, the waters beneath the Sea Serpent shifted, revealing not the expected sandy bottom, but an impossible cyclopean silhouette, not coral, not rock, but something geometrically perfect, impossibly vast, stirring within the depths. What unfolded next remains shrouded in fragments of fragmented journals and desperate logbook entries, salvaged from a subsequent disastrous voyage. Nathaniel, a man whose courage often bordered on recklessness, was not one to turn from an enigma, especially one that promised untold riches. He dispatched a small diving party, their primitive gear a stark contrast to the unimaginable world they were about to breach. They returned, not with gold or jewels, but with tales of luminous alien architecture, of structures built by no human hand, and of a chilling, resonant hum that vibrated through the very water. And they brought back relics. Not simple artifacts, but strange, geometrically precise objects crafted from an unknown obsidian-like material that seemed to drink the light, pulsating with an almost imperceptible energy. It was a plundering, a trespass into realms never meant for the surface world. With these objects came the whispers, the vivid nightmares that began to plague not only Nathaniel, but his crew, and eventually his direct descendants. A shadow had been cast, a pact unknowingly forged in the abyssal twilight. The Miller family's fortune grew, but so too did their misfortunes. Vessels vanished without a trace. Captains lost their sanity on the open sea, and a peculiar sickness, a creeping dementia, seemed to cling to the elder male line. Elias Miller's current affliction, his mind consumed by ancient charts and cryptic warnings, is not a simple malady of age, but a direct echo of his ancestors' transgression. The inherited terror that haunts Dr. Lyra Miller's dreams of cyclopean ruins and monstrous guardians stirring beneath the waves is not mere nightmare. It is the ancestral memory reawakened. Could these relics, wrenched from their ancient resting place, have been more than mere objects? Could they have been keys, or perhaps anchors, binding the Miller lineage to a power far beyond their comprehension, now demanding reparations for a sacrilege committed centuries ago? The historical discovery of Captain Miller was not a stroke of luck, but the very genesis of their undoing. Are you ready to uncover the true nature of this dark covenant and the price it has exacted across generations? Stay with us, because what we are about to reveal may change your perception of the oceans forever. The silence that swallowed Lyra Miller's final transmission was not merely the absence of sound. It was the echoing void of an impossible vanishing, a sudden, absolute erasure. Her research vessel, a beacon of scientific inquiry, had been plucked from the ocean's face as if by an unseen, colossal hand. For Elias Miller, the news of his daughter's disappearance, a terrifying echo of generations past, did not arrive as a shock, but as a confirmation of a looming dread. It was the moment the ancient prophecy, long whispered in the decaying halls of the Miller Manor, decided to break its silence and collect its due. The generational curse was no longer a grim history. It was a living, breathing entity, stirring awake. As the days bled into weeks, the very air within the salt-blasted structure overlooking the Outer Banks grew heavy, laden with a palpable, icy presence. Elias's creeping dementia, once a slow erosion of his faculties, transformed into something far more sinister. It became a conduit, a gateway for the awakening power beneath the waves. His fragmented memories began to coalesce into terrifying, coherent visions. Not the confused wanderings of a failing mind, but chillingly lucid nightmares of cyclopean ruins. Not just dreamed, but felt, as if his very bones were resonating with the submerged stone. He spoke of an unwinding in his blood, a sensation of ancient currents pulling at his very essence. And the air would grow cold around him as he recounted impossible geometries and the rhythmic, guttural roar Lyra had last reported. The Unspoken Sea documentary team arrived, drawn by Elias's desperate, cryptic plea. We stepped into a world where the past wasn't merely remembered, but actively breathed. The initial objective was an investigation, a search for answers. But what we found was not just a grieving family. It was a battleground where an ancient, territorial intelligence was making its presence known. Elias, previously a man consumed by his charts and warnings, now seemed consumed by them. His eyes, once clouded, sometimes cleared with an unnerving lucidity, revealing a terror so profound it transcended human comprehension. He'd point to the roiling Atlantic outside his window, whispering of sentinels and gateways that were no longer dormant, their slumber broken by the echoes of a distant plundering. The phenomenon manifested in subtle, unnerving ways. The deep, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from the ocean on moonless nights felt more in the chest than heard. The sudden, inexplicable chilling of rooms, despite the coastal warmth, and the increasingly frequent, profound seismic tremors reported along this stretch of the Carolina coast. Tremors that baffled geologists, but seemed to Elias like a heartbeat from the abyssal depths. The very structure of the manor groaned, not from the wind, but as if in sympathy with a deeper internal shift. Elias often stood by the skeletal docks, his back to us, mumbling a language no human should know, a language not of words, but of primal, oceanic sounds, as if communing with the dark waters. Was his mind merely failing, or was he, the last male miller, becoming an unwilling antenna for the very entities his ancestor had provoked? Was the curse not just a weight upon their legacy, but an active transformation, pulling the family, one by one, into the forbidden underworld? The final transmission from Lyra Miller's vessel echoed not just through the vast, indifferent ocean, but directly into the heart of a family already teetering on the precipice of ruin. Her disappearance, sudden and terrifying, served as the final, brutal catalyst, forcing Elias Miller to confront a truth he had long kept guarded, a legacy of terror passed down through generations. His mind, once sharp and formidable, had been slowly consumed by a creeping dementia, not a simple decline, but one inextricably linked to the very subject of their family's suffering. Ancient nautical charts, scrawled with cryptic warnings, and strange, unsettling symbols he obsessed over in his isolated study. He knew. He always knew. Or perhaps he remembered what his blood compelled him to recall. The Miller Manor itself, a spectral sentinel perched precariously on the outer banks, bore witness to this generational agony. Its weathered timbers groaned with the weight of centuries, each creak a lament for vanished ships and lives lost to the hungry maw of the Atlantic. Within its decaying walls, heirlooms from ill-fated expeditions lay gathering dust, not mere relics, but silent, chilling testaments to an ancestry inextricably bound to the forbidden depths. The air within was heavy, thick with unspoken histories, a place where the past wasn't merely remembered, but actively breathed, exhaling the chill of the abyssal currents. What compelled Elias to cling to these faded warnings, even as his mind unraveled? Was it madness? Or a desperate clarity born from a deeper inherited terror? For generations, the Millers had felt the chilling tendrils of the Bermuda Triangle's enigma, not as distant observers, but as unwilling participants in a dark ancestral drama. Their 18th century privateer forebear, a man named Jeremiah Miller, had dared to plumb the depths of that forbidden zone, driven by ambition and a hunger for ancient treasures. But what he found and what he stole was no mere gold. It was something far older, far more potent, and certainly far more vengeful. This was the genesis of the curse, the audacious folly that ripped open a wound between worlds. The privateer's journals, meticulously preserved yet deliberately concealed within the man's forgotten chambers, spoke in veiled terms of a pact, not with any earthly power, but with something unimaginable. Entries described structures not built by human hands, geometries that defied comprehension, and a presence that watched from the unfathomable darkness. These were the true heirlooms of the Miller line, not precious gems, but a slow, agonizing descent into madness and loss. The question, then, is not merely what Jeremiah found, but what he gave in return. And how, after centuries, does a family truly begin to pay for a debt incurred in the deepest abyss? Stay with us as we prepare to unearth the first tangible links to Jeremiah Miller's catastrophic legacy. A legacy that now threatens to drag the last of his line into an eternal, watery grave. Are you ready to dive deeper into this unexplored, abyssal world where history holds the key to a terrifying future? The ocean, in its vast, indifferent embrace, had swallowed Dr. Lyra Miller and her crew. Their final, distorted broadcast, a symphony of terror and an impossible roar, echoed in the souls of those who heard it. A profound silence descended, heavier than any known pressure, a void where life had been. In this quiet, Elias Miller, his voice a ragged whisper against a world consumed by dread, began to speak. His words were not merely an account, but a confession, an unfolding of generations of secrets etched into the foundations of his crumbling manor. He led us not to maps or charts, but to a hidden chamber beneath his study's decaying floorboards, a place redolent with the scent of aged paper and forgotten salt. There, nestled among brittle maritime instruments and compasses frozen in time, lay an artifact unlike any known to conventional archaeology. It was a sphere, subtly asymmetrical, crafted from a material defying identification, neither stone nor metal, yet possessing the cold, smooth density of both. Its surface was not uniform. Intricate organic patterns spiraled across it, absorbing dim light rather than reflecting. This, Elias explained, was the heart of the Leviathan, a relic passed down through the Miller line, a piece of the very civilization their ancestor had plundered. The sphere hummed, a vibration felt more in the bones than heard. It was said to be the mechanism that sealed the ancient pact, catalyst for its awakening. Legends whispered of how it pulsed, not with light, but with shadow, when the great entity stirred beneath the abyssal plains. Elias, his eyes glazed with distant fear, recounted family lore. This relic, near ocean influence, would emit a low, mournful call, beckoning something from the deep. Was this the silent, omnipresent anchor of their generational curse? A conduit for forces beyond human comprehension, forever tethered to their fate? Its true terror lay not just in its origin or whispered history, but its current state. As Elias carefully drew it from its velvet-lined box, a faint pulse emanated from its core. The air around it grew heavy, charged with an unseen energy. A delicate, ethereal hum began to fill the musty chamber, a sound resonating with the very last transmission from Lyra's vanished vessel. It was a sound of awakening, a call to something ancient and hungry. What was this artifact truly awakening? And could it be the key to understanding Lyra's terrifying final moments? Or merely a prelude to our own? The ancestor, the audacious privateer Elias Miller, was not merely a pirate seeking gold. His logbooks, meticulously preserved in the manor's damp archives, tell a far more chilling tale. They speak of a voyage in 1778, not for spoils of war, but for whispers of a sunken treasure, a legend whispered among desperate sailors in dimly lit taverns along the North Carolina coast. This was no ordinary treasure. It was rumored to be a source of immense, unimaginable power, hidden beneath the treacherous currents of what would later be known as the Bermuda Triangle. His ship, the Sea Serpent, a vessel notorious for its daring raids, vanished from official records for months. When it reappeared, it was scarred and limping, its crew decimated, their eyes haunted by an unspeakable terror. Elias, the ancestor, returned changed. His journals, initially filled with bravado, descended into increasingly frantic scrawls. He wrote of cyclopean architecture rising from the abyssal plains, of structures that defied all known physics and human construction. He described an encounter, not with a sea beast of legend, but with an intelligence, an ancient, primal consciousness that permeated the very water, a palpable presence that had not merely guarded the ruins, but inhabited them. His plunder was not gold or jewels, but an artifact described only as the heart of the deep, a pulsating, obsidian relic that seemed to hum with a life of its own. This was the moment the pact was forged, an exchange of something incomprehensible for the family's future prosperity, a prosperity that would prove to be a gilded cage. The immediate aftermath was one of chilling prosperity, followed by a slow, creeping horror. The Miller family's fortunes soared, their coastal manor growing in opulence. Yet this newfound wealth came at a cost. The ancestor Elias himself began to suffer. His dreams were plagued by visions of crushing depths and the guttural roar he'd described in his logs. He would wander the halls, muttering warnings of the price and the awakening. It wasn't long before the first of many tragedies struck the Miller line. Maritime accidents, unexplainable disappearances, and a pervasive sense of dread settled upon them, always tied to the very stretch of ocean from which Elias had returned. The artifact, the heart of the deep, became a dreaded family heirloom, locked away in a hidden vault beneath the manor, its existence a secret known only to the patriarchs, a silent, malevolent presence. This was their first contact, not with a benign ancient wisdom, but with an indifferent territorial force. The oceanic adventure is just beginning. The chilling silence that followed, Doctor. Lyra Miller's final transmission was not merely an ending. It was an echo reaching back through centuries of maritime history, across the very same tumultuous waters that have, time and again, swallowed ships whole and spun tales of the impossible. The Outer Banks, a graveyard of the Atlantic, has long whispered of more than just treacherous currents and sudden squalls. It speaks of a pattern, a methodical disappearance that defies logic. Predating radar and satellite, hinting at an ancient vigilance beneath the waves. Before Lyra's vessel became another ghost on the sea, generations of mariners navigated these perilous fringes of the Bermuda Triangle, their logbooks often filled with entries that defy rational explanation. Imagine, if you will, the captains of wind-powered schooners, their only guide the stars and their compass, suddenly finding both fail them. Accounts from the late 18th and early 19th centuries speak of compasses spinning wildly, as if some unseen magnetic force warped the very fabric of navigation. Of ships, fully rigged and seaworthy, found adrift, with no crew, no signs of struggle, only an eerie, desolate calm. Were these early manifestations of the same anomaly that consumed Lyra's research ship? Were they the first tremors of an awakening power, testing its reach? One chilling report from 1840 describes the schooner the Sea Serpent, found eerily empty just miles off Cape Hatteras. Her cargo was intact, her lifeboats secure, but every soul aboard had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the simmering kettle on the galley stove and a playing card face down on the captain's desk. No storm had raged, no pirates were sighted, just an inexplicable void where life had been moments before. Local fishermen, their faces weathered by salt and sun, men deeply attuned to the ocean's moods, spoke of strange phosphorescent lights beneath the surface on moonless nights. Not the gentle glow of bioluminescence, but focused, purposeful gleams, moving with an unnatural speed, sometimes seemingly following vessels, sometimes hovering just below the waterline before plunging abruptly into the abyss. Were these the distant, shimmering eyes of entities guarding a forgotten domain? Or perhaps the probing tendrils of something stirring from an ancient slumber? Even more unsettling were the sudden, localized fogs that would descend without warning, thick and disorienting, muffling sound and distorting vision, often preceding a disappearance. It was as if the very air itself conspired to erase the presence of those who ventured too close to the forbidden thresholds of the deep. These weren't isolated incidents, mere nautical misfortunes. Generations of Miller family records, brittle and faded, passed down alongside their cursed inheritance, contain cryptic references to these very phenomena. Elias Miller, in his brief, lucid moments, would clutch ancient, hand-drawn charts, his trembling finger tracing lines to unseen depths as he murmured about the watchmen of the deep and the lights that warn, his eyes wide with a terror that transcended his creeping dementia. He spoke of warnings delivered not by voice, but by a chilling, inherent understanding passed through the bloodline. Were these the first anomalies experienced by his ill-fated ancestor, the privateer who dared to plunder from the deep? Or were they merely the ocean's natural, though extreme, caprices, misinterpreted by fearful minds? Dive with us into this unexplored abyssal world as we probe deeper into the strange, documented occurrences that laid the groundwork for the modern mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle. What if these ancient accounts, often dismissed as superstition or simple navigational error, were in fact the earliest warnings? What if they were signals, not from arbitrary natural forces, but from something profoundly, impossibly old, stirring beneath the waves, its ancient eyes once again fixed on the surface world? The question remains, were these initial vanishings and strange observations merely the ocean's indifferent power at work? Or were they the slow, deliberate actions of an ancient territorial intelligence, patiently asserting its claim, preparing for its due? And what does this ominous history portend for the last of the Miller line? The ancient timbers of the Miller Manor, groaning under the relentless maritime winds, are not merely walls. They are the silent custodians of a chronicle woven from salt, desperation, and an enduring terror. Within their decaying embrace, Elias Miller, a man slowly consumed by the very legacy he struggles to understand, guarded a secret more potent than any treasure chest. His descent into dementia, we now realize, was not merely age, but a mind fractured by the unbearable weight of knowledge, an attempt to decipher the impossible. Are you ready to truly understand the genesis of this familial torment? The roots of the Miller curse stretch back to the tempestuous 18th century, to Captain Alastair Miller. A privateer by trade, a man of ruthless ambition and insatiable curiosity, Alastair was drawn to the notorious waters off the Carolina coast, not by chance, but by whispers of an impossible treasure, a relic of an age that defied human history. His personal logs, barely legible, brittle with time and neglect, speak of a unique, almost obsessive quest. These documents, carefully preserved amidst the clutter of Elias's study, reveal a man teetering on the precipice of madness long before the depths claimed him. Alastair's charts, crude yet disturbingly precise, mark an anomaly within the Bermuda Triangle, a place avoided by even the most hardened mariners. It was there, amidst unnatural currents and phantom lights, that his ship, the Sea Serpent, made its chilling discovery. Not gold, not jewels, but something far older, far more menacing. His entries describe colossal, geometric structures beneath the waves, not coral, not rock, but architecture of impossible design and scale. He spoke of an obsidian-like temple, its entrance shrouded by primeval, almost living algae. It was from this forbidden sanctuary that Alastair, driven by a blend of avarice and academic zeal, extracted a singular object, a polished, dark stone tablet, pulsating with a faint, internal luminescence. The tablet was not mere stone. It felt alive, resonating with a frequency that seemed to hum within the very bones of those who touched it. Upon its surface, etched in a script unknown to any human tongue, were symbols that Elias, in his fleeting moments of clarity, identified as directly correlating with the horrifying patterns of Lyra's vivid nightmares. This was no simple theft. This was an unholy transaction. Alastair's notes, cryptic and increasingly frantic, hint at a bargain, perhaps unintended, perhaps forced, made with the ancient intelligence that guarded the ruins. The removal of the tablet, he believed, would unlock untold power. Instead, it bound his bloodline to an entity that demanded restitution. The dark pact was not spoken words, but the very act of desecration. For generations, the Millers have paid the price. Each subsequent disappearance a grim reminder of Alastair's audacity. The question now is, what was the true cost of that singular historical discovery? And how many more Millers must vanish before the debt is finally settled? Stay with us, because what we are about to reveal may change your perception of the oceans forever. The silence that had long clung to the Miller Manor, broken only by the Atlantic's mournful sighs and groaning timbers, began to change. No longer the quietude of a forgotten past, it was a charged stillness, pregnant with an unseen presence. Elias, his mind a labyrinth of fading memories and cryptic charts, found his dementia shifting. His incoherent mutterings, once dismissed as fragile ramblings, started to coalesce into chillingly precise warnings. He spoke not of past voyages, but of impending tides, of hunger from below, his clouded eyes fixed on unseen horizons. "It stirs," he would whisper, clutching at air. "The debt is called." The Unspoken Sea team, initially focused on archives and Elias's fragmented recollections, began to witness the insidious creep of the phenomenon. Their robust recording equipment suffered inexplicable surges, static bursts sounding less like interference and more like a whispered language, or the deep, resonant hum of something impossibly vast. Cold spots manifested in the warmest rooms, bone-chilling drafts carrying the scent of salt and decay, even with windows sealed. These were not mere anomalies. They were tactile warnings, the periphery of an awakening. The most disturbing manifestations were not physical, but psychological. Elias's nightmares, once private torments, began to bleed into the waking world, and strangely, into the crew's experiences. One night, a field producer awoke, gasping, convinced she'd heard the guttural roar Lyra described in her final transmission. A sound that resonated not in her ears, but deep within her chest, like the pulse of a leviathan. Another reported vivid dreams of cyclopean architecture. Not unlike Elias's hidden sketches, dreams feeling less like imagination and more like a direct, invasive broadcast from an alien intelligence. The sea, once a distant backdrop, seemed to draw closer, its shoreline whispers growing louder, more insistent. Faint, shimmering lights began to appear offshore in the darkest hours, moving with an intelligence defying natural phenomena. Not steady ship beams, but erratic. Pulsating glows mirrored ancient patterns on Elias's charts. These were not distant vessels, but something else entirely, an unblinking gaze from the abyssal depths, observing the manor and its dwindling inhabitants. The Miller family's inherited terror was no longer confined to musty ledgers or whispered legends. It was a tangible, evolving presence, reaching from the depths, subtly at first, then with increasing certainty. The question was no longer if the ancestors' pact was real, but how this ancient intelligence was manifesting its demands, and what its next terrifying move would be. Are these manifestations merely warnings, or the prelude to a far more direct and devastating collection of a centuries-old debt? The gnawing despair in Elias Miller's eyes, a vacant stare fixed on an unseen horror, is more than the cruel march of dementia. It is the curse manifesting, a slow, deliberate consumption of his very being, a mirroring of the abyssal void that now threatens to swallow his lineage whole. His mind, once a repository of seafaring lore, has become a fractured tapestry of ancient dread, populated by shadows and echoes of a pact too terrible to comprehend. He speaks in riddles, fragments of names, and coordinates whispered into the salt-laden air, coordinates that ominously point not to uncharted waters, but to places already etched into the annals of oceanic terror within the triangle. We find ourselves drawn into these whispers, for they are the breadcrumbs leading to the very heart of the malevolence that grips the Millers. Among his few moments of lucidity, Elias clutches a tattered, ancient nautical chart. Not a common map, but a hand-drawn relic, ink faded by time, yet alive with cryptic symbols, swirling patterns that resemble abyssal currents, and a stark, single mark precisely where Dr. Lyra Miller's vessel vanished. These are not merely navigational aids. They are blueprints of a forgotten geography, a subterranean dominion that defies every principle of conventional cartography. What if these aren't just maps of a place, but of a power, a resonant frequency that calls out to specific bloodlines? It's here, within these unsettling cartographical anomalies, that we unearth the tale of the Marauder's Wake, a Miller family schooner lost without a trace in 1867, not far from the coordinates Elias now obsessively traces. Accounts from the era speak of a luminous fog that swallowed the ship whole, of distressed calls cut short by a sound described as the grinding of granite teeth against the hull of the world. The only surviving log entry, scrawled by the captain, a distant Miller cousin, spoke of the deep ones stirring, awakened by our folly, claiming their due, their folly. What exactly did the Millers disturb, and what has it cost them, century after century? The Marauder's Wake was not an isolated incident. It was a prelude, a grim chapter in a generational saga of debt and terror. Each vanishing, each unexplained loss tied to the Miller name within the triangle's embrace is not mere coincidence. It is an intricate, horrifying payment plan. The strange lights reported off the Carolina coast for generations, dismissed as weather phenomena or mass hysteria, are perhaps the flickering sentinels of this ancient power, a warning. Or an invitation. What if these lights are not just optical illusions, but reflections of a subterranean city, cyclopean structures now stirring from their aeons-long slumber, their very awakening causing ripples in our reality, distorting time and space around them? The very air in the Miller Manor, heavy with unspoken histories, feels charged with an unseen energy, a thrumming vibration that echoes the deep, a constant reminder of the entities that lie beneath. These are not just memories that linger, they are active presences, entities that perceive the Miller bloodline as an open wound, a perpetual gateway. The terrifying dreams that plague Lyra, far from being mere psychological distress, could be direct communication, a psychic beacon drawing her and her family deeper into the abyssal maw. The guttural roar from her final transmission, was it the sound of a beast or the groan of an ancient world reawakening, demanding its final, most precious tribute? What unimaginable horrors wait for those who dare to approach the forbidden underworld? And what will it take to sever a curse etched not just in blood, but into the very fabric of the ocean's oldest mysteries? The price, it seems, is still being paid, and the ledger is far from balanced. The spectral hum of the Miller Manor never truly fades. It vibrates through the very timbers of the house, a constant low thrum that Elias claims is the ocean breathing. But after Lyra's disappearance, the team from the Unspoken Sea began to perceive it differently. Not as a natural phenomenon, but as a resonance, a frequency. Her final transmission, meticulously analyzed, revealed not just panic screams and that impossible roar, but a sub-audible pulse, a rhythmic beat that defied natural oceanic currents. This was the true terror, a signature from the abyss, echoing perhaps from the very ruins she described. Elias, in his lucid moments, often spoke of a recurring dream, a vision he'd dismissed as the ramblings of an old mind. He described a colossal, churning vortex of water, not unlike the whirlpools of classical myth, but alive, pulsing with an inner light. At its heart, he swore, was a single immense eye, ancient and cold, watching. It was a vision shared, he claimed, by his father, and his father's father, a terrifying inheritance that surfaced in their most vulnerable sleep. This eye, he now believed, was the very source of the pulse captured in Lyra's final moments, a beacon from the entity demanding its tribute. Yet, this was not just a passive curse. Lyra's recovered research data, pulled from a secure, encrypted drive, painted a more chilling picture. She had been tracking unexplained seismic anomalies, not deep within the Earth's crust, but localized, shallow tremors emanating from a specific, forbidden zone of the Bermuda Triangle, precisely where her ancestor, the privateer Captain Jeremiah Miller, was rumored to have plundered his cursed bounty. These weren't tectonic shifts. They were deliberate pulses. Almost like a heart beating beneath the ocean floor, growing stronger with each passing generation. What was the true nature of the pact Captain Miller had forged? Elias's scattered notes, interleaved with fragments of old nautical charts, began to hint at a desperate exchange. One particular page, stained with what appeared to be dried seawater and an almost luminous green residue, depicted a crude, hastily drawn glyph. A spiral within a triangle, with an eye at its center, strikingly similar to Elias's dream and the pulse identified in Lyra's transmission. Was this the seal of the pact? A mark branded upon the Miller lineage? The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a localized haunting or a historical misfortune. It was an active, intensifying communication from an intelligence that had been awakened and was now actively seeking out its blood-bound inheritors. The tremor in Lyra's voice before the transmission cut, the primal roar, the sub-audible pulse, they weren't random events. They were responses, an ancient entity reacting to her intrusion, perhaps even recognizing the cursed bloodline within her. We stand on the precipice of understanding a horror far older than humanity, a debt that transcends generations, collected not in gold, but in lives. Are we truly just observers, or have we, by merely investigating, become entangled in this abyssal contract? What grotesque payment did Captain Miller truly promise to secure his illicit gains? And what does it demand of his descendants now? The silence that followed Lyra's screams was not an end, but a prelude. The next payment, it seemed, was already overdue. The coastal mists, thick with the scent of salt and secrets, often whisper tales of Captain Jeremiah Miller, the audacious privateer who carved the Miller legacy into the Atlantic's treacherous history. But what the legends often omit, what Elias's decaying mind struggles to articulate from the fragmented journals, is not merely the plunder, but the very moment of inception, the terrifying instant of the first contact. It was not a deliberate quest for forbidden knowledge that led Jeremiah to the cyclopean depths, but an inescapable pull, a whisper in the currents that defied all navigational logic. His ship, the Sea Serpent, was caught not in a storm, but in an unnatural calm, a vortex of inert water where the compass spun wildly and the stars vanished behind an opaque, unmoving haze. Below them, the ocean glowed with an eerie, phosphorescent light, revealing shapes that no cartographer had ever dared to chart. Jeremiah's logs, scrawled in a hand that betrayed a man wrestling with cosmic dread, speak of a structure unlike anything fashioned by human hands. Colossal, geometrically impossible, yet undeniably ancient, rising from the abyssal plain. He described not just ruins, but an architecture that felt alive, breathing with a primordial energy. It was within this submerged leviathan that the first contact truly occurred. Not with a living being, perhaps, but with an intelligence so vast, so alien, that merely being in its presence shattered the boundaries of human comprehension. Jeremiah, driven by a compulsion he could not resist, or perhaps by a desperate gamble to escape the ocean's suffocating grip, ventured into a cyclopean chamber. He described symbols that pulsed with an inner light and an overwhelming pressure, a silent voice that resonated directly within his very being. He took relics, yes, but perhaps what he truly took, or what took hold of him, was the seed of the curse itself. Was it a pact, an agreement forged in terror, or merely the consequence of disturbing an ancient territorial power? The journals remain hauntingly vague, filled with frantic drawings of impossible entities and repeated phrases like, "The eye awoke and the tribute demanded." This wasn't a bargain struck with words, but an unspoken covenant sealed by transgression. The initial toll was subtle. Strange nightmares plaguing Jeremiah's crew, inexplicable misfortunes befalling his vessel, and a growing paranoia that consumed the captain himself. He returned a changed man, haunted, his once bright eyes reflecting an eternal twilight. He brought back not just gold and artifacts, but a chilling resonance that adhered to his bloodline, a legacy of contact that would demand its due across generations. The question isn't whether the Miller curse began then, but what exactly was awakened in that first, terrifying encounter? What ancient mind stirred from its aeons-long slumber, and why did it choose the Miller lineage as its conduit to the surface world? The ocean, a canvas of endless blue, often betrays no hint of the malevolence that sometimes stirs within its depths. Yet, history is littered with whispers, not just of storms and navigational errors, but of phenomena so utterly alien, so devoid of earthly explanation, they seem plucked from another dimension. Long before the term Bermuda Triangle was coined, long before the Miller lineage ever dared to meddle with the abyssal sleep, the Atlantic began to show its teeth in ways that defied human comprehension. We speak not of the grand disappearances that would later capture global attention, but of the insidious, subtle anomalies that marked the very genesis of this cursed region's infamy. Picture, if you will, the early 18th century. Colonial ships, sturdy and resolute, plied these waters. Records speak of vessels like the Sea Serpent, a merchant brig bound for Charleston in 1709, discovered adrift, sails furled, a half-eaten meal on the table, yet utterly devoid of its crew. No distress signals, no signs of struggle, only an unnatural, chilling quiet that hung in the air like a shroud. The logbook, found open, simply ceased mid-sentence, its final entry detailing an unnerving, rhythmic hum emanating from below the hull. What force could so meticulously, so silently, erase an entire complement of mariners from the face of the earth? Further south, near what would later be recognized as the heart of the Triangle, explorers' journals from the late 17th century speak of compasses spinning wildly, their needles dancing like dervishes, refusing to acknowledge true north. These weren't isolated incidents, but persistent, localized magnetic disturbances so profound they rendered navigation impossible. Was this merely geological eccentricity, or something far more ancient, far more deliberate? Radiating from the unseen floor below, could these early distortions be the faint echoes of a power not yet fully awake, but stirring? And then there are the light phenomena, not the fleeting flashes of distant lightning, but sustained, pulsating glows beneath the surface, reported by terrified sailors who mistook them for infernal beacons or the eyes of colossal unseen creatures. These were not bioluminescence. They were too bright, too organized, moving with an eerie intelligence that seemed to patrol the abyssal realm. These were the first warning signs, the earliest tremors from a sleeping leviathan. They were the oceanic equivalent of a quiet breath before a roar. These weren't just navigational curiosities or isolated tragedies. They were patterns, nascent expressions of a deep-seated anomaly that suggested a deliberate influence, a territoriality that predated mankind's understanding. They hint at an ancient mechanism, perhaps not yet fully engaged, but certainly aware. Are these merely forgotten footnotes in maritime history, or are they the initial, faint heartbeats of the very entity that would later claim the Millers? The implications are chilling, suggesting that the stage for the ancestors' calamitous pact was set long before he ever cast his greedy shadow across these depths. Could these early disappearances, these inexplicable lights, have been the first tests, the initial incursions of a power observing its new, vulnerable prey? For generations, the Miller Manor has stood as a monument to unspoken histories, its very timbers groaning under the weight of secrets too terrible to utter aloud. But buried within its crumbling foundations, amidst Elias Miller's labyrinthine collection of ancient nautical charts and cryptic warnings, a new, chilling truth began to emerge. It was not a grand, public revelation, but a quiet, almost accidental discovery, tucked away in a forgotten sea chest, sealed against time and prying eyes. Inside, among tarnished silver and a compass frozen on an impossible bearing, lay a leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age, its script faded, but undeniably the hand of Silas Miller, the infamous 18th-century privateer and progenitor of the curse. This was no ordinary logbook of plunder and naval encounters. Its entries, meticulously dated from the late 1700s, spoke of a desperate voyage into the very heart of the Triangle's most volatile waters. Long before its name became synonymous with dread, Silas, a man driven by ambition and a hunger for forgotten riches, detailed his initial awe at discovering cyclopean ruins beneath the waves. Structures of impossible geometry, gleaming with an alien luminescence. But that awe quickly curdled into terror. He wrote of objects of immense power, not merely plundered, but given to him, with a terrifying stipulation. The journal became a confession, chronicling not a theft, but a terrifying negotiation, a desperate bargain struck with something ancient, something that pulsed with a cold, primeval intelligence, far beneath the crushing pressure of the abyss. Silas's entries painted a horrifying picture, not of a simple exchange, but a generational toll. He detailed the signs, the strange phosphorescence on the waves, the disembodied echoes from the depths. The subtle shift in the currents that seemed to guide his vessel, not to safety, but to the very maw of the forbidden. He wrote of promises made under duress, under the silent, judging gaze of entities he could barely comprehend, but whose power he deeply feared. The journal revealed the true nature of the pact, a recurring sacrifice, a payment in blood, not for wealth, but for the temporary placation of an awakening power, a relict from a lost civilization demanding its due. It was a deal forged not to gain riches, but to escape an immediate, unspeakable horror, a desperate compromise that simply deferred the ultimate price. This was the shocking historical discovery, a chilling testament written by the very hand that forged the chains binding the Miller lineage. It was a document that utterly reshaped our understanding, transforming the tale from one of audacious folly to a tragic narrative of an ancestor's desperate surrender, a forced allegiance to an incomprehensible force. The journal ended abruptly, its final pages stained and warped, describing a return voyage haunted by an unceasing guttural roar echoing from the deep. A sound Silas claimed was the ancient entity's promise to collect its due. What horrific truths lay buried within those final, waterlogged entries, forever obscured by time and terror? And how could a family escape a debt paid not in gold, but in the very lives of its descendants, to something that has waited patiently for centuries beneath the waves? The guttural roar, the impossible structure, the screams. Lyra Miller's final transmission painted a sonic canvas of pure, unadulterated terror. This fragmented echo, however, held more than just panic. What if those sounds were direct expressions of something profoundly alien, transcending our understanding of biology and architecture? The true horror began to unfurl when we subjected the raw audio to advanced forensic analysis. Interlaced with Lyra's desperate cries, a distinct, low-frequency hum permeated the recording. Not the groan of metal or seismic rumble, but a vibration unlike any natural resonance. Our experts confirmed it, a frequency designed not for hearing, but for feeling, for disrupting, for dominating. The most bizarre discovery came when Elias Miller, in a moment of alarming lucidity amidst his dementia, recognized this hum. He called it the Salve of the Sleeping Leviathan, a sound he claimed had haunted his lineage for generations. Not a physical sound, but a silent whisper in the blood, an auditory hallucination that presaged catastrophe. Could Lyra's terrifying dreams, the vivid visions of cyclopean ruins and monstrous guardians, be more than psychological echoes? Could they be an involuntary, inherited resonance with this very frequency, a direct neural link to the entities themselves? A terrifying form of communication, passed down, a biological receiver for an ancient broadcast. This revelation plunged our investigation into a chilling new reality. This wasn't a historical curse, a dormant specter, but an active, manifesting presence. The hum wasn't confined to Lyra's recording. It began to be detected. Sporadic, localized bursts of the same resonant frequency now register off the Carolina coast, near Lyra's last known position. These are not random disturbances. They are precise, deliberate emanations, and they are growing stronger, more frequent. It is as if the very entities that consumed Lyra's vessel are now broadcasting their presence, asserting their ancient claim, not just on a bloodline, but on an entire region. Our advanced sonar imaging in the same abyssal zones has now revealed anomalies on the seafloor. Not geological formations, but vast, geometric patterns, subtly beneath sediment, yet undeniably artificial. These are not merely ruins. They are structures of impossible scale and alien design. Stark confirmation of Lyra's desperate words. Their architecture defies physics, constructed from unknown materials, or perhaps unseen dimensions. The most chilling theory suggests the Miller ancestor did not just plunder relics. He may have, inadvertently or intentionally, activated a failsafe, a warning, or a summoning mechanism. The Dark Pact was a trigger, a binding contract finally enforced after centuries. The forbidden Underworld isn't just a location. It's a sentient, territorial intelligence. The Miller bloodline has become its unwitting, generations-long conduit. the key to its re-emergence. The entities, the guardians, are not merely reacting to intrusion. They are collecting their due. And what they demand now is not just a life or a vessel. They demand a reckoning. Are we witnessing the awakening of something that has slumbered for eons, truly beyond human comprehension? Something that now views our presence in the oceans as an intolerable affront? What price will be exacted when an ancient intelligence decides to claim its domain? And the Millers are merely the first to pay? We have journeyed through generations of Miller torment, through the echoes of an ancestor's audacious folly. But what truly lies beneath the waves, guarding the secrets that demand such a terrible toll? Elias Miller's fragmented warnings, once dismissed as the ravings of a fading mind, now coalesce with the chilling final transmission of his daughter, Dr. Lyra Miller. They paint a mosaic of an impossible reality, but truth far more alien than any legend. The crumbling charts Elias clutched, maps inked with symbols unknown to conventional cartography, depicted not landmasses, but geometric anomalies deep within the triangle's most volatile zones. Their lines, once seen as feverish scrawls, eerily mirrored the nascent sonar readings from Lyra's final expedition. Readings that spoke of an impossible structure. Not a ruin in the traditional sense, but something vast, symmetrical, and utterly inhuman, embedded in the very seabed itself. It defied all known geological processes, all human architectural understanding. Could this be the core of the forbidden underworld? Not merely a lost city, but an operational entity. This structure, hinted at in the ancestors' stolen logbooks, where he spoke not of plundered gold, but of an unveiling, suggests the relics were never material objects. Perhaps the true plunder was knowledge, or the disruption of an ancient mechanism. The transmission's accompanying guttural roar was no whale song, no known seismic tremor. It was resonant, primeval, a sound that spoke of immense, territorial power. It suggests not just a structure, but a guardian. The Miller family's curse, then, shifts from a punitive act to something far more intricate, an intrinsic connection, a generational key to an awakened force. Each successive Miller, perhaps through latent psychic resonance or a deeper genetic imprint, has unwittingly contributed to its stirring. Lyra's dreams, Elias's dementia-fueled visions, were they not just symptoms, but active links, drawing them deeper into the abyss? The very waters off the Outer Banks, once a simple backdrop to their decaying manor, now reveal themselves as an extension of this vast, submerged intelligence. It observes, it waits, and it demands. The concept of an ancient, territorial intelligence viewing human existence as an encroachment fundamentally redefines our understanding of the ocean's vastness. It posits a living boundary, a submerged frontier where humanity's reach ends and something else begins. The triangle is not merely a vortex of energy, but a gate, and the Miller bloodline a reluctant keeper. Lyra's final broadcast, frantic and desperate, described not just an encounter, but an activation. The structure was not dormant, it was responding. Are we witnessing the consequence of a forgotten pact, or the deliberate awakening of an entity that has simply been biding its time? What if the ancestors' transgression was not merely theft, but an unwitting invitation, a generational toll paid in sacrifice? And what if Lyra Miller, in her pursuit of scientific truth, stumbled upon the final trigger, the ultimate resonance that completed the long-dormant circuit? The ancient current has found its conduit. Could it be that the Miller curse was not a punishment for theft, but an activation, a generational key to a power far grander and far more terrible than any human could conceive. And if so, what happens when the key finally turns? The visions that plagued Lyra, once dismissed as stress-induced nightmares, now presented themselves in a far more terrifying light, amplified by Elias's fragmented confessions. He spoke not just of inherited dread, but of specific images shared across generations. A collective nightmare meticulously etched into the Miller psyche. These were not random phantasms of a troubled mind, but architectural blueprints of the impossible, cyclopean structures seen in Lyra's final transmission. A chilling confirmation that the dreams were less a symptom and more a direct channel. What if the curse was not merely a debt collected, but a slow, insidious assimilation, a parasitic presence drawing not just blood, but consciousness itself from the Miller line? This horrifying prospect pushed our investigation into truly uncharted waters. We began to consider that the ancient power beneath the waves was not simply a relic, but a living, thinking entity. Its intelligence vast and alien, operating on timescales incomprehensible to human minds. Its awakening might not be a sudden jolt, but a gradual reassertion, its tendrils reaching out, first subtly through the subconscious, then with increasing intensity, demanding its due. And its due, we now suspected, was not just the material wealth plundered by their ancestor, but the very essence of the Miller lineage, a strange, spiritual taxation for a violation committed centuries ago. The deeper we delved, the more evident it became that the ancestors' folly was not just an act of greed, but an unwitting pact, a key turning in an ancient lock, opening a conduit between worlds. He had not merely stolen from the abyss, he had pledged his descendants to it. The very air in the decaying manor seemed to thicken with this revelation, each creak of its timbers a sigh from a past that refused to lie buried. Elias, in his moments of horrifying clarity, would trace patterns on ancient charts, symbols that mirrored the monstrous guardians Lyra had described, the same ones appearing in the family's shared nightmares. These weren't just guardians in the defensive sense. They were extensions of the ancient power, its sentient limbs, tasked with retrieving what was owed. The terrifying implication was that Lyra's expedition, rather than stumbling upon the ruins, might have been drawn there, compelled by an ancestral echo, her very existence a beacon for the reawakened entity. This was a fate not merely inherited, but actively pursued through subconscious compulsion, a genetic homing beacon for an ancient horror. The idea that their salvation lay in severing this connection now seemed a delusion. How does one sever a bond woven into the very fabric of one's being? A pact written in blood and dream. The Miller family was not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their very souls, against an entity that saw them not as individuals, but as an extension of a historical transaction. The ocean's depths, once a realm of exploration, now became a tomb, and the Miller lineage a sacrificial offering. Are some destinies truly inescapable? An intergenerational price for an unforgivable trespass against the primordial? The abyss has claimed its share, but what it demands now is far more terrifying than simple disappearance. The Atlantic's historical tapestry, for centuries, has been woven with threads of inexplicable disappearances. Early colonial logs speak of ships swallowed whole, crews vanished. Naval records recount strange lights, wild compasses. These weren't isolated events or folklore. What if they were tremors of an awakening deep beneath the ocean? directly linked to one privateer's folly and the pact he forged. What if these anomalies were early symptoms of a power stirring, a prelude to the true horror of the Miller curse? The curse we understand is not merely loss of life, but the systematic absorption of a lineage, a feed line for an entity that hungers for more than flesh. It is a consumption of identity, memory, soul. The Miller family's genetic inheritance becomes a tether, an open channel to the abyssal guardians. Elias Miller's deteriorating mind, once despair-inducing, is now the unwilling battleground for this confrontation. His dementia, far from simple decline, is a manifestation of the curse, an internal struggle against the awakened power's pervasive influence. His fragmented thoughts are terrifying glimpses into the ancient past, echoes of the pact replaying within his being. He is not losing his mind. His mind is being taken, piece by painful piece, by the entity his ancestor disturbed. In chilling lucidity, Elias revealed a truth more terrifying than imagined. The plundered relics were not treasures. They were anchors, binding the Miller bloodline to the abyssal city. The curse wasn't punishment for theft, but a contractual obligation to serve as unwilling conduits, their lives a perpetual tithe. This is why Lyra's expedition, venturing into that anomaly, was an inevitability, a preordained convergence. She, the last direct descendant, possessed the strongest channel. Her disappearance was not vanishing, but a final, horrifying collection of what was due. This confrontation isn't with a physical monster, but the chilling realization of an inescapable destiny. Elias's struggle is humanity's desperate last stand against an ancient will. His cryptic family ciphers detail the grim terms. A bloodline destined to eventually become the Guardians. A terrifying melding of human and abyss. Can the human spirit defy a pact woven into the DNA of a lineage, centuries in the making, now demanding its ultimate fulfillment? Is there a loophole, a chance to sever this calamitous connection before the abyss claims its final, most precious prize? The silence that followed the Unspoken Sea's desperate plea for answers from the depths of the Outer Banks was not one of peace, but a profound, unsettling absence. The Miller Manor, once a beacon of generational dread, now stands hushed, its weathered timbers no longer groaning in spectral agony, but in a quiet resignation. Elias Miller, the patriarch whose mind wrestled with ancient charts and cryptic warnings, is gone. Not vanished into the triangle, but into a silence perhaps more profound, his final days consumed not by dementia, but by an understanding that transcended sanity, whispered in fragments of primordial truths before he, too, succumbed to the ocean's eternal embrace. His struggle, his desperate outreach, had not perhaps severed the ancient pact, but redefined its terms, twisting the current of the curse into a new, more subtle flow. And Dr. Lyra Miller, the brilliant marine archaeologist whose final transmission echoed with impossible structures and guttural roars, her vessel, her crew, they remain lost to the abyssal plains. Yet, strange, fragmented data packets, impossibly encrypted and bearing the signature of her expedition's unique deep-sea sonar, have begun to surface in the digital currents of the dark web, appearing and vanishing like ghost ships on the digital ocean. They contain not clear images, but patterns, mathematical constants that defy terrestrial physics, and faint, rhythmic pulses that some linguists whisper resemble ancient, forgotten tongues. Is this her legacy? A final desperate attempt to communicate, or merely the lingering echo of a confrontation that shattered the boundaries of human comprehension? The forbidden underworld has not opened its gates wide, but perhaps in its wake it has left behind breadcrumbs of its impossible existence. The Bermuda Triangle, the very nexus of this Miller legacy, continues its enigmatic dance. While Lyra's disappearance added another chilling entry to its infamous ledger, it also ignited an unprecedented surge of scientific and anecdotal interest. New unclassified satellite imagery reveals fleeting thermal anomalies beneath the waves. Patterns of light and shadow that hint at vast, submerged architecture shifting with the deep sea currents. Are these the remnants of the Miller ancestors' folly, or the true guardians, stirred by Lyra's unintentional provocation? The question of what lies beneath is no longer a fringe theory, but a haunting whisper in the hallowed halls of oceanographic institutes, challenging long-held paradigms of our planetary history. The struggle of the Millers, once a desperate, intimate fight against an ancient, territorial intelligence, has morphed into a larger, more existential query. It is a stark reminder that beneath the veneer of our known world, there exist intelligences, structures, and pacts that predate human memory, operating on timescales and in dimensions we are only beginning to perceive. Their story is a chilling testament to the dangers of disturbing what slumbered, of plundering secrets from an epoch when humanity was but a dream. The Unspoken Sea continues its journey, guided by the indelible mark the Miller family left upon our collective consciousness. We chronicle these vanishing points, these impossible truths, because the deep has a memory, and it demands to be heard. We invite you to join us as we peer into the abyssal maw, where the known gives way to the truly magnificent and terrifying. Dive with us into this unexplored abyssal world, for the currents of mystery never cease their flow. Are you ready to uncover the secrets of the deep, even those that whisper of ancient curses and primeval entities? Stay with us, because what we are about to reveal may change your perception of the oceans forever, if you dare to listen. The search for truth never ends, and ours is just beginning.